Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to Season 2, Episode 10 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2022 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe, and joining me, as always, is Nick Cap. Nick, today we have a fun episode. We're talking about some good offenses and some bad offenses, I should say. There's no defense in this one.
Yeah, it should be a good time. I mean, obviously, you have your high-end offenses, low-power offenses. I actually found a pretty good website I think I'll share with you after the podcast that helped me out a lot on this. That had to do with how teams scored last year, how they ranked everywhere in terms of fantasy alone, specifically for offense, which helped me, shape my list a lot more than I thought it would. But yeah, very interesting. Very interesting.
All right. So just so you guys know, the way that we're doing this, we're going to talk about 5 offenses that we want a player from. So hypothetically, if you want a player from if you want players from the 49ers, let's say you want 4 of them, you want a piece of the 49ers offense, they're on your list. Now let's say it's a team you don't want a player from. Maybe it's the Philadelphia Eagles for some reason. You don't want any Eagles. That's on your list. So we're going to talk about that in a second. If this is your first time listening to us, thank you so much. You can find us on every podcast platform, including but not limited to Spotify, Apple Podcast, Anchor, Google Podcasts, basically anywhere where you can find the podcast, you can find us, the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating, a subscription, a review. We really do appreciate all of that. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much. Hit that subscribe button, give us a like, drop a comment. We'd appreciate all of that as well. If you want to follow us and interact with us on social media, please do. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. All right, so here's how this works, as I was kind of explaining before. Me and Nick each have a list of 5 offenses that we want a player from. This is who we want. So if I want to a player from, I'll use the Eagles again. If I want a couple players from the Eagles, because I think they're going to have, a great season as an offense, then I want an Eagle on my team. The Eagles would be on my list. If I don't want a player from the Dallas Cowboys, like if I don't want any Cowboys, like even if CeeDee Lamb, like if I'm fading CeeDee Lamb, then the Cowboys can be on my list. So it's okay to put a team on your list that has a good player. It's just you got to defend it. And we might have a little bit of debate in this, maybe not. But so let's start with our top offenses that we do like, top offenses that we want to target. We're going to go 5 to 1. Nick, first off, do you have any honorable mentions that you do want to mention? I have 3 of them.
I have 3 as well. You want me to give one at a time or all 3?
You can go all 3. We could do like a little breakdown of why they didn't make your cut.
Okay, so 3 teams for fantasy and for the regular NFL I'm very high on this year. Kansas City, Philadelphia Eagles, and Denver Broncos. I like all 3, but I think that there's not enough clarity in any of those situations where I'd say I want multiple pieces from the offense. For example, for the Eagles, I love A.J. Brown, I love Jalen Hurts, and I like Devontae Smith. Denver Broncos, you all know I love Cortland Sutton, I like Russell Wilson, and I like Javonte Williams. Kansas City, I love Travis Kelce, but I just don't know which receiver from that core I want. So do I want a piece of the offense or multiple pieces? Absolutely. But I think there's very clear cut for me, the five teams where there's a lot of pieces and a lot of target share to go around, a lot of points there that I really want to eat up on my teams.
The way that I almost formulated my list is they needed to have 3 to 5. It has to be a strong 3, mainly 4 to 5 players that I want to target in my fantasy draft. So at number 8, I have the Chargers, Austin Eckler, Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, also Joshua Palmer's there in the late rounds. I'm not targeting Eckler, but again, I would like a piece of that Chargers offense because they're going to score a lot of points, but I'm not targeting Eckler. I'm also not targeting Keenan and Mike Williams as other receivers are like in that range, and Herbert's going too early. That's why it's number 8 on my list. Number 7, I have the Arizona Cardinals. I like Kyler, but if I could get him at the right place, I bought him too early on Sunday, the draft that I spoke about. A lot of people are higher on James Conner. I'm not. Marquise Brown, I'm very, very high on. He's my big sleeper for the year. DeAndre Hopkins going around like 10, 9, 8, something like that. And Rondell Moore looks like he's going to be more involved. But not enough pieces that I really want to draft. Really just 2 guys that I really want to draft, but a couple really good pieces. Number 6 is the Denver Broncos. And I teetered on this one because Russell Wilson's going to have a good year. Javonte Williams should have a good year. Melvin Gordon is very draftable. Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton are both going to have good years. I don't know who's going to have the better year. They're both going to have good years. That's 5 pieces I really like. But they didn't crack my list. So let's go to your number 5, Nick.
Here I have the Dallas Cowboys. Last year, they finished with the second most fantasy points per game at 98 points per game on the offensive side of the ball. They've led the league in plenty of offensive statistics. Their offense was absolutely loaded. My one big concern for the team is the loss of Amari Cooper. That's why I don't have them higher on this list. I think there's a lot of targets to go around. You already saw James Washington also go down with a season injury. Michael Gallup looks like he's going to get a delayed start to the season. So a lot of questions to be answered in Dallas. I do also think they see a bit of regression on defense. They forced an absurd amount of turnovers, which gave them a lot of good possessions, good field. They scored the most touchdowns in the league last year on offense. So I think you see a little bit of regression, but I think that offense is too high powered. Dak puts up yards and yards and yards and yards. We've seen this for plenty of years in his career. We've seen him for a 5-game stretch at the start of the season, put up almost 2,000 yards in those 5 games. Like, Dak has a monster arm. There is yards to go around. This offense will roll with Mike McCarthy. I know a lot of people are hesitant on him. Zeke's going to put the ball in the end zone. He's a great at his ADP. Same thing with Dak. As I said, CeeDee Lamb, great player, should have a great workload as a wide receiver 1. And it looks like they have a rookie wide receiver out there who fits very well. And, of course, Dalton Schultz, who I was very high on last year. Nick's very high on this year. So pretty much every key position in fantasy, you have a playable player there to what I think is a pretty good ADP. So for me, Dallas Cowboys, that's an offense I definitely want to have a piece of this year. Just not as big as they would. I just not anticipating them to be as dominant as they were last year.
I absolutely hate the Los Angeles fucking Rams. I hate the Rams, but the Rams are going to be an electric offense again. Cooper Kupp is going to have a phenomenal season. He's going to be a wide receiver 2 or 3. Do I think he's going to be the 1? No, but that's besides the point. Cooper Kupp's going to have a great season. Allen Robinson's coming in. He's going to turn back the clock to 2 or 3 years ago. He's going to have a phenomenal season. He could be your league winner if you're drafting him in round 5. Cam Akers, if he's given the workload, everybody seems to have an opinion on Cam Akers. I will take a chance on Akers if he's my running back 2 or 3, depending on my strategy. Am I targeting Akers? No. Am I okay with taking Akers? Yes. And finally, Matt Stafford. I have Stafford being a top 6 quarterback this year. I saw a story in ESPN this morning. I forget who wrote it, but out of the top 8 quarterbacks last year, I believe 6 of them are quarterbacks that didn't have a lot, that had less than 400 rushing yards. So I know we really like to talk about the rushing stats in fantasy football, but there's not many quarterbacks that are really doing both. And Stafford's a gunslinger. He's going to throw 40 touchdowns. He's going to throw 4,000 yards. He's going to have a great season with the Rams. So you have 3 players, Cam Akers, Allen Robinson, Cooper Kupp going in the top 40 to 50. Matt Stafford, I think, is a steal in round 10 or wherever he's going. The Rams going to put a lot of points on the boards. If you have the receivers, it's going to get your points in the first 3 quarters. If you have Cam Akers, I think he gets a lot of work in the 4th quarter when they have leads. I'm really confident in drafting any Ram. They're going back to the Super Bowl this year. I've already said it on the show that they're going back to the Super Bowl, and I'm sticking to that one. So you want a Ram on your team. You're number 4, Nick.
Here I have a kind of a shocking team, but the more I'm looking at training camp and the more I think about this team, there's no reason people should be fading them. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers. We've been talking about Noodle Arm Big Ben for 2-3 years, and we've been saying all they need is an average NFL arm with Mike Tomlin that'll put this all together. I'm not saying Mitch Trubisky or Kenny Pickett is the answer there, but Kenny Pickett looked really good. It looks like he is going to be the starter. He looked composed. He's used to that stadium. He's known that offensive staff being from Pitt. He's going to fit in well there. I think they're going to see I think there's going to be a lot of targets to go around. They had 75 fantasy points per game, which wasn't great for last year. But the offensive line saw improvement. The defense saw improvement. They already said Najee Harris, he's not getting 400 targets or game usage this year. He's getting 350. To me, that doesn't say he's getting a downgrade in work. That says Najee Harris is getting 350 uses over across the entire season. Deontay Johnson's been a monster. He's been a PPR machine. He's someone that I love this year at his ADP. George Pickens appears to be one of the best rookie wide receivers from the class. He's probably going to surpass Chase Claypool on that depth chart. Claypool is not a terrible streamer. He struggled a lot with Ben's weaker arm because he is a big play guy. He's a 40, 50 yard.
I actually like the rookie more than Claypool. I don't want to cut you off, but I'm more interested in George Pickens than I am in Claypool at this point.
Absolutely. I completely agree. Claypool would be the last person from the offense I'd want that's startable in fantasy, but I think he's a play on a weekly basis. I don't think you'll have a problem streaming him and banging on him getting that 40, 50 yard touchdown. And Pat Freiermuth, of course, is going to be a streamable player. He'll probably be rostered in 80 to 90% of leagues after your draft week. So it's a high power offense, high motor. Team's going to play well. They put up good fantasy points on a weekly basis last year. But as we said, Big Ben was the one thing holding them back. Now we finally get a chance to see how much he was holding them back. I think the Steelers have league winners on this roster rather than the most dominant players.
At number 4, I have the Minnesota Vikings. New head coach, new offensive coordinator, offensive minds coming in. Mike Zimmer's extinct. That fossil's out of there. And I think Zimmer was a good head coach a couple of years ago when they had the really great defense with Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith, etc. But this team has so much offensive talent. You need an offensive mind. And you know what? If the Seahawks did this, Russell Wilson would still be there, and the Seahawks would have a top 5 offense this year. So whatever. The Vikings are doing things the right way. Justin Jefferson is going to have 1,500 yards this year. He's going to be the wide receiver 1. Dalvin Cook, if he stays healthy, he's going to be a top 5 running back. So the 2 guys already in round 1 that you have an option of taking on this offense. Cook goes down, Alexander Madison's going to step right up to the plate. That's a late round sleeper that you should be taking in your drafts. KJ Osborne, late round sleeper as well. Adam Thielen, he's been a touchdown machine. All he does is find the end zone. He's still there. Is he aging? Yes, but he's still there as well. And Kirk Cousins, he finished at the quarterback 11 last year in fantasy football. He's been a stat sheet stuff for his entire career. But now he has an offensive-minded head coach. They play the Lions twice a year, and I love the Lions fight, but they don't have a great defense. They play the Bears twice a year, who is arguably the worst team in football. And I think they could beat the Packers. I think the Vikings can win this division. I think their fantasy players are going to put up a lot of numbers for you. I think if you have a Viking on your team, I think you have a good chance of winning fantasy football this year. I think you're going to win your championship if you have Justin Jefferson. He's a league winner right there. So you know what, Nick? I like that. I like the Vikings. I have the Vikings at number 4.
You know what I got to say to you? I got to one-up you. I got the Vikings at number 3, baby. I love the Minnesota Vikings this year. I completely agree with everything Nick said. Look, we're not just talking about an offensive-minded coach. We're talking about an offensive-minded coach that made Todd Gurley a fantasy monster for back-to-back seasons. In both those years, he saw over 80 targets in each of those seasons. Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison will see that workload. Adam Thielen, we feared touchdown regression last year. Guess what? He stepped up to the plate and delivered another double-digit touchdown season. You're not going to tell me with an offensive-minded head coach that now you fear the regression. If you feared it last year, here's the year you should feel a lot safer than you did last year with the regression. KJ Osborne seems to be the clear-cut wide receiver 3 on a high-power, high-motor offense, and Kirk Cousins is absolutely going to thrive just like Jared Goff did in that Rams offense. I have no concerns about the Vikings. I think the Vikings will be dominant for fantasy this year.
And number 3, I have the Raiders. I love the Raiders. I've said it on the show a bunch of times. I need a Raider on my fantasy football team. Round 1, Devontae Adams. How could you not like Devontae Adams on your fantasy football team? I know Nick's low on Devontae Adams, but I'm going to win that Wendy's bet with him. No. I'm going to win it. He's going to owe me a $5 Wendy's meal, whether it's nuggets or fries or whatever I want. I'm going to win that meal when Devontae Adams has a better season than Cortland Sutton in fantasy football.
Hey, it's within 5.
Within 5. It's a steal. It's a steal getting Adams at the 10 pick. It's ridiculous. This is a guy that's been drafted basically top 5 in the last few years, now going at number 10. That's a steal. I love getting Josh Jacobs in rounds 4 or 5. I think he's a guy who's going as a running back 2. There really should be a low-end running back 1. He's had, I think, 3 straight years of close to 1,000 yards. He's a bowling ball. He's a touchdown machine. He's going to get all the goal line carries. I want Josh Jacobs. Then there's Darren Waller. I think his numbers are going to regress a tiny bit because there's so many mouths to feed on this offense. The touchdown numbers need to go up. I think he only had 2 last year. But still, reliable tight end that you could take. Hunter Renfrow in rounds 9 or 10. He was the wide receiver 17 last year. I think he had close to 1,000 yards and maybe 6 touchdowns, if I'm correct. Again, he might be the odd man out, but still, that's a guy you could take with a lot of upside, especially if Adams misses time or Waller. If one of them misses time, it's more targets for Renfrow, who was great last year. And lastly, Derek Carr. I've been saying for so many weeks, this is Derek Carr's year. Year 9, the year that quarterbacks have the most progression. Year 9 when Matt Ryan won an MVP. When Peyton Manning won an MVP. I think Rodgers won an MVP. That's when quarterbacks usually hit their peak. It's Derek Carr's year. With this offense, he should have 40 touchdowns and 4,000 yards. Will he? I don't know, but I'm going to draft him in rounds 10 or 11 because I think that he has the potential to, and the quarterback position is so deep. He could even be your backup. That's 5 players that I really like on the Raiders. I think 3 of them are going in the first 50, and then we have obviously Derek Carr and Hunter Renfrow going in the back half of draft. So that's why I really want a Raider on my football team, my fantasy football team, I should say.
You want to debate that one real quick?
Yeah, let's hear it.
There's not a single Raider outside of Derek Carr I like at their ADP. Josh McDaniels has not produced a top offensive player in New England outside of Rob Gronkowski or Julian Edelman when he was the only weapon there. Every time that they've had multiple
Julian Edelman can't lace up Devontae Adams' shoelaces.
Yes, but Josh McDaniels has always
Tom Brady was an MVP on that team.
Yes, and guess what I just told you? Derek Carr is the one piece I like at ADP. Devontae Adams going in the first round, I think is a huge mistake for a lot of fantasy owners. I think you want him in the second round. Does he have upside? Absolutely, but I think his ceiling's a lot lower than it was with Aaron Rodgers. I think not enough people are acknowledging Derek Carr is a big step back from the back-to-back MVP. I think there's a lot of issues for that Raiders offense. I'm not low on them. I'm not fading them, but I think a lot of them are being a little bit too overhyped at the moment.
I think they're going to prove you wrong this year. We'll see. I'll take them over the Cowboys. I'll take all their players scoring more than the Cowboys do. I guarantee that one.
Well, I would take. Well, if you saw the rankings, I do have Devontae Adams over CeeDee Lamb.
I would take Devontae over CeeDee. I would take. But would you take Jacobs
Adams
over Zeke?
Lamb. I have Waller over Schultz. I have Dak over Carr. But
what about Jacobs? Do you have Jacobs over Zeke?
I think I have Zeke one ahead of Jacobs. I could see either or.
It sounds like you have all the Raiders over your Cowboys. So by your own ranking estimation, wouldn't the Raiders be a higher offense?
Per ADP.
All right. Well, but again, if those are your rankings, then you're okay. We're going to box ourselves in here. But anyway, I think they're going to prove you wrong. Who's your number 2?
I got a different division rival for you, buddy. I got Trey Lance's San Francisco 49ers.
Ugh.
I think the offense is absolutely loaded. Kyle Shanahan is an absolute mastermind. All those players are being underdrafted at their ADP. I want a massive, massive, massive piece of the 49ers offense. I have no problem stacking them this year. I think the 49ers are absolutely loaded. George Kittle is currently going in the 6th to 7th round. That is an absolute blasphemy.
Which I don't want to cut you off, but ADPs at tight ends are actually the worst because there's always a round when the tight ends just go, and it's usually round 5. So I don't want to cut you off, but Kittle will probably end up going in round 5 with a slew of tight ends as well.
I agree, and that's exactly where he should be going. The young quarterbacks always target the tight end position heavily. Kyle Shanahan, like I said, absolute beast, creates phenomenal running schemes. Elijah Moore being drafted a little bit before George Kittle. I think that's a massive mistake. I've said it for 3 or 4 straight episodes now. Elijah Mitchell is bound to have a monster season in that Kyle Shanahan offense. Deebo Samuel, yes, he'll see a little bit of regression on the rushing side, but that's already factored into his ADP. He finishes a top 5 wide receiver last year. He's being drafted on the closer to 10 than he is to 5. So I think all these pieces are good. I think Brandon Ayuk is a good piece, and Trey Lance is an absolute league winner. If Trey Lance is going to give you 4 or 5 games with 30 plus points, not to hurt your Stafford argument, but Stafford didn't have a single game over 30 points last year with the Rams. Kyle Shanahan, the most impressive stat I've ever seen for a coach with a quarterback in the history of football is in your first 16 starts. Patrick Mahomes has the most passing yards in NFL history. Number 2 is Nick Mullins. What is he going to do with Trey Lance's monster arm? He's going to create an absolute powerhouse of an offense. I want to own it. I want multiple pieces from it. I want to stack that offense. I think the 49ers and that offense give you, like I said about the Vikings, league winners.
You make a good case there. Would you take Debo over Devontae Adams?
I have him ranked higher than Adams.
Oh, you're nuts. You are nuts. No, you're nuts. I can't.
I'm so excited
with the Devontae Adams disrespect. If I get Adams in a league and I win, I am buying an Adams jersey and I'm wearing it on this show.
I hope you do.
Oh, man.
But I can't wait for 14, 15 weeks from now when Devontae Adams is the wide receiver 9, 10, 11. And it hurts to see because everybody had him as the 10th pick.
All right. I have the Tampa Bay Bucks. Tom Brady's thrown 40 touchdown passes the last 2 years. Mike Evans being drafted in round 3. He's going to have another 1,000-yard season. Chris Godwin's coming back from the ACL, but last year I think he was a wide receiver 6 before he tore the ACL. Like he was getting targeted like 15 times a game. And if you could get Godwin around like 5 or 6, you're getting a steal because he's going to come back and be Tom Brady's favorite target. I don't love Leonard Fournette's ADP, but you know what? They don't really have guys behind him that they're confident with. He's still a bowling ball, and Brady still likes him. So he's still going to be a bell cow over there. And Tom Brady, I got him around 14 in a draft on Sunday, and I almost wish I didn't draft Kyler Murray. Because if I could get Brady in 14, why would I even draft a quarterback before that? The guy had 40 touchdowns last year. He was the quarterback 3 in fantasy football. He was 3, and he was probably drafted in round 10. How could you not want a Buck? The Bucks are going to be everywhere in fantasy. Mike Evans and Godwin will be top 15 to 20 wide receivers. Phenomenal. Leonard Fournette's probably going to be a top 10 running back, and Brady's going to be a top 10 quarterback. And then when Gronk comes back, he's just going to score a lot of touchdowns. He'll be your waiver wire ad in week 8. Yeah, I want a Buck. The Bucks are going to run the South. They're going to steamroll those 3 teams in the South. The Saints will give them a run for their money, though. And that's the week you don't play Mike Evans. But the Bucks will steamroll the Panthers and the Falcons. They're going to beat them both by like 40 points. So, yeah, I want a Buck on my fantasy team.
I want particular Bucks, but they're not who I have at number 1. You have the Rams at 1. I don't
have the Rams at 1.
Oh, you have the Rams in your top 5. I have the other team in LA. I got Charger Nation, baby. I love Justin Herbert. I love Austin Eckler, not at ADP, but I love Austin Eckler. I love Keenan Allen. I like Mike Williams. I love Joshua Palmer. Nick knows I've been on Joshua Palmer since like a month after he was drafted. That this kid's
since last year, yeah. Nick was high on Palmer last year, and I was high on Gabriel Davis, and now they're both having their sophomore.
Yes, they are. Both of them are going to be monsters this year. I love the Chargers. I think there's so many guys that have the top 10 potential in that offense. Justin Herbert obviously has top 3 potential for fantasy purposes. He's currently being drafted as the QB2 in fantasy. Austin Eckler currently going off the board as the RB3. Keenan Allen currently going in at the wide receiver 10. Mike Williams somewhere in between 12 and 14. Joshua Palmer, a late round sleeper. And they're even going to use those tight ends. If you don't think that you're going to have 3 or 4 double-digit touchdown games from Gerald Everett, like it's going to happen, and it's going to piss a lot of people off when you have to play against them. But that Chargers offense is high power. They had the 3rd most fantasy points per game last year, and they added a bunch of defensive monsters that are going to force turnovers. The team had one of the worst clock management in the league in terms of possession time. That's going up this year. Therefore, the Chargers offense is on the field more, scoring more points, giving you more opportunity. I think the Chargers are going to finish averaging over 100 fantasy points per game, which would have led the league last year.
I got to play devil's advocate, though, because you're going with ADP with your 49ers, but then you don't want any part of Eckler. So if you don't want Eckler, you want Eckler, but not as ADP, well, you're not going to get him later unless you're playing with a bunch of idiots. So in reality, your highest drafted player is like Keenan Allen, right? or Mike Williams on that offense?
That I would personally take would be Keenan.
Right. Okay.
But I think there's a player on every team that I would argue against their ADP.
That's fair.
To be fair. So
alrighty. I have the Cincinnati Bengals. I know they're coming off a Super Bowl, and I know there can be Super Bowl hangover. I just don't think it's going to be there for this team because they weren't supposed to be in the freaking Super Bowl. They probably were not as talented as the Rams or the Bucks or the Chiefs, but you know what? They rallied around each other. And guess what? They got better in the offseason. They fixed the one issue they had. If they had those offensive linemen, or if that personal foul or whatever it was didn't happen, they have rings on their fingers. There's no reason why the Bengals should be off these lists. Jamar Chase is being drafted in round 1, probably a little bit overdrafted because he's going to have some double teams. But Chase is going to have another great year. He's going to be an alpha dog in this year in the NFL for the remainder of his career. T. Higgins, he's being drafted. I think he's undervalued. He's being drafted in round 3. I got him at pick 26. He outscored Chase in the last 6 games last year. Joe Mixon, I don't love that he doesn't catch balls, but you know what? He's the featured back, and Zach Taylor likes him a lot. He's going to get all the goal line work. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns. So those are 3 guys that I'm comfortable taking in the top 25. Then there's Joe Burrow. You take Joe Burrow around 8 to 9. I know you're not happy with Burrow. I know that you're not a Burrow guy in fantasy football, and that's okay. But I think Burrow's going to throw a ton of touchdowns. I think he's going to have a lot of yards. He's going to have more time to throw this year. So I think the Bengals going to score a lot of points. I think they'll control that division. I think they're going to win a lot of games in the AFC. I see talent across the board, and I see superstars. I don't just see talent. I see superstars. And in fantasy football, superstars win you championships. You need the late round sleeper, but you need superstars to win championships. If you go out there and draft a guy in round 1 or 2 that's not a superstar, you're not winning a championship. You're going to win championships by drafting Bengals. I'm drafting Bengals on my fantasy football team. So those are our top 5 offenses that we like. And now let's go to the ones we don't like. 3 honorable mentions quick for you, Nick, that you don't like.
I don't like the Browns. Deshaun Watson looks awful in camp. We don't know the status.
The Browns almost made my list. They're not on my list, but they came close.
Yeah, they're in the honorable mentions. Amari Cooper, he'll be okay, but he's dealing with injuries already in camp. The common issue for him. Those running backs have potential, but that whole offense doesn't look good. Green Bay Packers, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know who they're going with. There's way too many question marks and no player I like at ADP outside of A.J. Dillon. And Nick's beloved Houston Texans, who have...
They didn't make my list.
They didn't make your list?
Well, they did not make my list.
There's only one player on that team that I would draft, and it's Brandon Cooks.
They should have made my list. Anyway, the Tennessee Titans at 8. I don't want Derrick Henry this year. And then who are you taking? Like maybe a fly on Treylon Burks, but the way that I organize my list is I need to do I want even one player on this team? And if it's that one player, is it a guy that may be cut by week 5? Robert Woods might have a solid year. I'll take a chance on him, but no, I really don't want Titans. There's so many receivers that I like more. I don't want Titans. My Seahawks, they're horrible. Like Drew Lock and Geno Smith, that's it. Like I definitely don't want Lockett. I don't even want DK because the position is so deep. I don't want him. I'll take a chance on Kenneth Walker in round 10, but that's it. I don't want Seahawks on my fantasy team. And lastly, my Houston Texans. Davis Mills stinks out loud. He's horrible, and the Bears are going to win more games than the Texans, and I'm going to win a $50 bet, and I'll be real happy about it. I like Dameon Pierce a lot, but again, it's a fly in the late round. I don't want Brandon Cooks, so I don't want Texans. No Texans. Nick, you're number 5.
Here I have the New York Football Giants. Last year, tied for last place in fantasy points per game at 62. The only reason I don't have him number 1 is because I love Kadarius Toney. I think he's an absolute monster of a talent. And Brian Dable is a great and all-time offensive mind taking over that offense and that head coaching job. I think the Giants will find some success, and they already made a clear outline of what their depth chart is. We already know it's Golladay and Toney on the outside. They announced a rookie wide receiver will be playing in the slot, and we know Saquon Barkley is going to have a role in the offense. So we already know what we're getting from them. So we have those questions answered. I just don't think it's going to be high power enough to put up enough fantasy points on a game where I trust taking multiple pieces of the offense outside of Kadarius Toney.
At number 5, I have the Atlanta Falcons. This talent with Pitts, this talent with Drake London. But who's throwing them the ball? Marcus Mariota, Desmond Ridder? No, I don't even want to take the chance. Pitts had 1 touchdown last year. His numbers should go up because it was so low last year, but I don't want to take the chance. There's other tight ends that I like. There's other receivers that I like. And then there's Cordell Patterson, who was just like a unicorn last year that I don't think we see again. The team's going to stink. They're going to be a bottom 3 team in the league. I don't want a Falcon on my fantasy team. There's many more players that I like in other positions. Number 4 for you.
Here I have your beloved Seattle Seahawks, Nick.
Oh, yeah, baby.
They averaged 79 fantasy points per game last year, which was pretty much middle of the pack, but you are losing your elite quarterback for the Geno Smith, Drew Lock. We know what that offense looked like last year without Russell Wilson. It was a complete shell of itself. Pete Carroll is going to stick to running the ball, and we do not know who the RB1 out in Seattle is going to be. So for me, I do not like touching the Seattle Seahawks this year, even though there is a ton of talent on that team. The talent would be the only thing that keeps me over putting them in the bottom 3.
Listen, I'm a big Bears guy this year just for the sake of my bet, but the Bears stink. They literally stink out loud. Their color's brown for a reason. They're horrible. You definitely aren't drafting a quarterback from the Bears. You might take David Montgomery, and I might take David Montgomery, if I'm being honest with you, if I really need a running back, but I'd rather have Josh Jacobs or the upside of Travis Etienne or even Elijah Mitchell on the 49ers, who are going at similar ADPs. You might take Darnell Mooney, who everybody's really high on this year, finished as the wide receiver 23. I have him on a dynasty team. But there's so many receivers that I'd rather have over Darnell Mooney, so why would I take Darnell Mooney? So I don't want a bear. They're not going to score a lot of points. They're going to be down in a lot of games. The offensive line is terrible. Justin Fields is in a real lose-lose situation. I don't want a bear on my fantasy team.
Just to piggyback off you, yes, I have the Bears at number 3. I don't like the Bears. We loved Darnell Mooney last year when his ADP was wide receiver 60. Now he's coming off the board at wide receiver 20. Justin Fields will have some fantasy value in super flex leagues, but that's about it because of his rushing upside. And that's it. There's no other real weapon there. They're talking about trading for Nelson Aguilar just to fill another hole at wide receiver. And David Montgomery seems like the only fantasy relevant player outside of Mooney on the roster. Well, I still think Khalil Herbert's a better talent back there. So I'm not trusting myself to take David Montgomery over guys like Elijah Mitchell, Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott, all guys going in his range.
I have the New England Patriots at number 3 because you don't know the depth chart of anybody on the Patriots. It's Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris. If one of them fumbles, Belichick subs them in. Then the receivers, Jacoby Brissett, Kendrick Bourne, and they have a Devontae Parker. Then I have 2 tight ends, I think, still.
Henry and Jonnu Smith.
There's too many battles, and there's not enough. There's not even a quarterback that I trust. There's nothing I trust on that team. They're not going to score a lot of points. Belichick will coach them up to win probably 7-8 games that are probably low-scoring games. There's nobody that I really want. I have Jacoby Myers on a team. That's okay. I have Stevenson on a team. Did I want them? Not really. Could they be cut by week 3? Sure. There's not a lot of appeal. I really don't want Patriots. I think there's better options out there. Unless you want to take a fly on a guy like Stevenson or Jacoby Myers, you can. It's not the worst pick in the world at round 11, but I just don't want Patriots.
Here's where at number 2, I have the Atlanta Falcons, Nick's beloved Atlanta Falcons.
I don't hate the Falcons. I just don't want them.
No. Hold on. We're going to rewind a quick to season 1 where we heard about 100 times throughout the season, I hate the Atlanta Falcons. Nick's catchphrase.
Oh, you know why I hated the fucking Falcons? Because they fucked me on my on what was it? Week 1, I stacked the Falcons in daily fantasy. Dumb decision.
Yeah, and you
then
got screwed over.
Cordell Patterson a couple times. I didn't no, they were a weird team last year. I hated the Falcons for stupid reasons.
They are a very weird team. And last year, with Matt Ryan, who has a very, very good NFL arm, they finished with 69 fantasy points per game. They will probably repeat that, or if not worse. Arthur
they should try to repeat it right at that number.
The only reason I don't have them lower is because I do like Kyle Pitts a lot in that offense. I think he does have a lot of fantasy relevancy. I actually saw a stat where Mariota, for back-to-back years of his career with Arthur Smith, produced top 3 fantasy seasons for Delaney Walker. So I do think Pitts will have a good season for fantasy purposes. But outside of that, there is no weapon on that team that I want. I know London gets a lot of hype because of how early he was drafted. He's already battling injuries. That team, I don't think, is set up for any fantasy success outside of Kyle Pitts.
At number 2, I have the New York Giants. Kadarius Toney, I'm not high enough on. Do I like him? Yes. Are there other receivers I really love? Yes. I want no part of Saquon Barkley at all. I don't trust him to play enough games, and if he does, I don't trust the talent to magically come back. We don't have genies to make wishes here. We didn't see the talent last year. Definitely don't want Daniel Jones. I want no part of Kenny Golladay. He was my big bust last year. I don't want to touch him. I don't want to be in a stadium with him. No, I want no part of Kenny Golladay in fantasy football. I think that's all they got. Like, they're going to be fighting for the number 1 pick next year because they're not going to score points or play defense. So no New York Giants for me.
So I'm really trying to think who you have at number 1 because you already used my number 1.
Do we have this? I did?
Yes,
no. How do you not have the same number 1 as me?
I have no clue who your number 1. Maybe I just forgot about someone. But my number 1 is the New England Patriots. I think that they are in for a rude awakening. I think this is their first terrible season under Belichick's regime since Brady. I think they're going to suffer a lot more than people think. They spend the most money on the wide receiver room in football. They spend the most money on the tight end room in football. And there is so much money going around, and there's no money for an offensive coordinator in that.
They're going to win 8 games.
They're going to win 8 games, but guess what they're going to do? They're going to rotate those running backs. They're going to rotate those receivers. You're going to see one receiver average over 10 fantasy points per game.
Belichick doesn't give a fuck about our fantasy teams.
And that's why I have him at number 1 for the reason I don't like him. I like the Patriots will produce, but the fact of the matter is, do you trust multiple?
The Patriots defense is going to produce.
We're talking about offenses.
Defense is going to produce. When they play your Jets twice a year, the Patriots defense is producing.
Talking about offenses.
That's an offense. That's an offense. In fantasy, that's an offense. Your best offense is defense. Who said that quote? I don't remember.
It's probably Bill Belichick, I think. Do you think multiple wide receivers from New England will average over 10 fantasy points per game?
No. I think Jacoby Myers can.
That's probably the only one who can. Outside of that, Ramondre Stevenson and Damian Harris. I don't know.
Damian Harris was a top 20 running back last year.
He was a top 20 running back, but it looks like Ramondre Stevenson is the one there. So we don't know what Bill Belichick wants. They have 2 guys running the offense, one being Matt Patricia, who couldn't run the Lions offense with Matthew Stafford. I think Mac Jones is a horrible quarterback. I think he's being way overhyped. I think that there's no fantasy. I think you have no fantasy luck here. I don't think there's a single player you trust week to week in this team. There's a reason that nobody from the New England offense is going before the 8th round, and I don't want any of them after the 8th round. You're taking opportunity over talent at that point, and as I said in our last video, I'm taking talent all day over opportunity in the later rounds.
Let's say it together, Nick. J-E-T-S.
You're a liar.
Jets.
You're such a liar.
You cannot take a Jet in fantasy football. You can't.
Breece Hall and Elijah Moore.
No. Breece Hall won't be a top 25 running back. Breece Hall's not going to be a top 30 wide receiver.
I will bet you Elijah Moore or Breece Hall finishes as a top 24 at their position.
Sure. What are we putting on for this one?
We'll do another Wendy's meal.
Another Wendy's bet. Okay.
That's fine.
No Jet is finishing in the top 24 of their position. Get the fuck out of here.
You're bugging. You're out of your damn mind. You did
the quarterbacks stink. The quarterbacks stink. I think Elijah Moore was like the wide receiver, 40 last year?
He had a 6-game stretch before he got hurt of being the wide receiver 4 in fantasy football.
He got lucky.
He
got lucky. They're gonna get shut out twice by the Patriots, and the Bills are gonna mess them up too. Von Miller's gonna eat that team alive. The Jets are competing for a number 1 pick next year.
You know what? Give your take. And I'm just going to enjoy in week 16 me munching on my nuggets because this is the worst bet I've ever heard.
Listen, I broke my cardinal rule last year. One of them. I should have had this on my draft strategies. Don't draft a Jet. I drafted Corey Davis last year. I got suckered into it. I got suckered into him getting targets, and I took him over other receivers. And Corey Davis wasn't on my roster by week 6. The quarterbacks are like Zach Wilson has an injury problem, and I don't think he's that good either. Now they have Cool Joe over there. No Flacco. I think Elijah Moore's talented. The offensive line isn't great. The quarterback play isn't great. The defenses they're going to face in that division are going to eat them alive. So I don't want any part of the wide receivers. Breece Hall, I think, has potential, but he's a Jet. I think if he's on any other team, I'm higher on Breece Hall. Nick traded for Michael Carter last year, think he was going to be his keeper, and they go and draft Breece Hall. So what if Michael Carter takes over? I don't know. I'm just saying where Breece Hall's being drafted at like pick 40, Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne, Elijah Mitchell, David Montgomery. I'll take them over Breece Hall. So what Jet am I actually targeting here? Why would I take Elijah Mitchell over like DeAndre Hopkins in round 8 or your Kadarius Toney, or there's other guys that have more potential? The Jets don't have potential. They have potential to finish as the worst team in the league.
I want to know which New England Patriot you would trust on a week-to-week basis more than Elijah Moore. Give me one.
Jacoby Myers.
You're a liar.
Yes,
You're
I will.
Jacoby Myers' ceiling is 14 points in a game. Elijah Moore's floor for a 6-game week was 18. You're out of your mind for this pick.
But I trust Jacoby Myers to score me a good 10-11 every week. I think Elijah Mitchell's going to go 5-15, 5-15. There's no consistency. He's Tyler Lockett, basically.
You're out of your mind.
I guarantee this one that the Jets are going to be a team you don't.
I don't know what you did before you got on this podcast, but it was not legal in some states.
This was good. This was fun.
This was
alrighty,
awesome.
guys. Nick, I need you to make a graphic for this. I want to see this on the social media and see if people think, because people respond to that. I'm curious.
You're out of your mind.
I want to hear what you guys think, though. If you guys listen to the show, let us know what you think. If I'm out of my mind, if Nick's out of his mind for our top 5 or bottom 5 offenses. This was fun. If you enjoyed this show, please let us know on social media: Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok. PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook, YouTube, Primetime Fantasy Podcast. If you're listening to us, hit that subscribe button, whether you're on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, wherever. Hit that subscribe button, give us a 5-star rating and a review. We will definitely appreciate that. If you're watching it on YouTube, hit that subscribe, a like, a comment, tell us that we suck. I don't care. We'd appreciate all of that.
Nick's opinion sucked, but that was
Thanks for listening, guys. We will talk to you on Monday. We're going to do a mock draft next week. It's going to be Monday or Friday. We'll have a live mock for you guys, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And Nick's going to take all the Jets in that mock. Talk to you on Monday. See you guys soon. Good luck in your drafts if you have any this weekend. Nick has one. I have one. We'll also recap that. See you guys soon.